Good evening, members, and a warm welcome to those watching online. Thanks for joining us this evening. Before we start the meeting, I'd just like to hand over to our Democratic Services Officer, Claire Johnson, for some housekeeping messages. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and please mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. Please refrain from using the chat function in the Teams except for recording a proposed motion. If a vote is required on any issue, this will be carried out by a show of hands. Finally, please ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Agenda item 1, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Tony Innell and Councillor Jukes Butt, and we also have one now for Councillor Howell, who unfortunately has left us. Substitutes this evening, Claire?
We have Councillor Hadley substituting for Councillor.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any items on the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, Chairman, only really to say for transparency that I'm a member of one of the town councils that was involved in the report, which I think is at the second item. Or third, well, whichever item it is on the agenda, I am a member of one of the town councils. Hope that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Public issues. Claire, do we have any public issues?
There's no public issues for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is a planning service improvement update. Members will remember we were having some problems with the planning system about 6 months ago, and some improvements were put in place by the council to try to sort some of those issues out. And this is an update on how the council's been progressing towards improving that service. And we have Councillor Philip Broadhead, portfolio holder for development, growth and regeneration, to briefly outline the report. Also with him this evening, we have got Councillor Bobby Dove, who has been invited, as she is now the portfolio holder for community safety and regulatory services. So with that, I'll ask, well, first of all, I'm going to call upon Mr. Bob Hanson, is it? Sorry. I beg your pardon. There. Councillor Broadhead, yeah, if you'd like to come in, please. Thank you.
Just in time, my computer just shut down when you're in the middle of talking, but I'm back on, so apologies for missing your introduction, but thank you very much regardless. Chair, I'm going to do something quite uncharacteristic for me and not talk for very long, and mainly because, as you've hinted at, this is an update on the progress that's been made, mainly through the operational side of the planning service. We took a paper through 6 months ago outlining some of the key areas that we were going to be focusing on as part of our planning improvement journey. And this is very much an update as to how that's been going. So much better that you hear from the experts, Colin and Nick, who can take you through and answer any of the detailed questions I'm sure that yourselves and the board may well have. What I will do is just give a little bit of background. We have some quite positive news within this paper, positive in terms of the area, but makes life very difficult in that we've had over a 20% increase in planning applications this year alone in the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. Now, clearly that's really good for our area. It shows that we're on the move. It shows that people are, improving and development is taking place. But at precisely the time that we're trying to, transform the service, bring 3 existing teams into one, as well as clear what has been a very significant backlog, it compounds an already difficult situation, which is why it is positive that within this report you can clearly see see that progress is being made. You know, paragraph 6 talks about the fact that we are seeing a continued improvement in performance on the time that planning applications are actually decided on, but we're still nowhere near where we need to be to fulfil our aspirations of having, you know, one of the best planning services of a local authority of this size. So the paper takes through individual areas that we talked about in the March-April paper that we're going to tackle. Gives you an update on them. It also gives a flavour of what's coming next. There is also a financial ask in this paper now that we've got some real clarity on what we need to do to bring the service up to scratch. We need to put a little bit of extra funds in there, which is absolutely the right thing to do. So in a moment, I will pass over to Colin and Nick with your permission, who can give a little bit more of the background. Two final things for me to say. First of all, we have had some changes to Cabinet recently. So Councillor Bobby Dove, who is on the call today, is taking over the more operational side of planning. She's very new into the post, so she won't be partaking in the discussion today, because this is very much about what we've been doing and what the next plans are. But I think it's really important for her to be here as part of that handover, and also, you know, at the beginning of this meeting, I would like to pay you know, a huge tribute to the whole of the planning team operating in what is extremely difficult circumstances at the moment. 20% increase of planning applications in the year, whilst trying to transform the service, and they've been led very, very ably by both Nick Perrins, who's on the call today as our head of planning, and also Colin Walker. Colleagues will recall that we brought Colin in initially, very, very experienced in the transformation arena in planning, having worked in some of the, you know, major cities across the UK, to lead on our transformation agenda here, and is now, as we made him our service director of planning as well, so very much leading from the front, hand in hand with Nick here as well. I genuinely feel that we're really now starting to make the progress that we need to. So with your permission, Chair, I'll pass over to Colin and Nick, who can maybe take you through a little bit of the background of what's been going on in this operational service, and also hopefully field many of the questions that you'll have tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Mr. Walker, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and good evening, members, and thank you for Phil for that quite detailed introduction. Actually, not sure there's not much more to add to that, but I will just focus on three things, if I may, and then hand over to Nick to fill in any gaps, and then we'll take questions at the end. The three things well, first one is around, just to ask some more about performance. I think it's fair to say that over time, the council has, as a planning service, been reliant on extensions of time on a range of applications. That's not unusual. Perhaps what is unusual is the scale of the numbers of extension of times on applications that we've been using. From a customer point of view, and particularly from the point of view of investors that come to us, I think that collectively we've come to the view that that's a position that we need to move away from and be able to operate our planning service in a much more timely way, and that has taken, or is taking, a number of changes in terms of how we do business. I think it's fair to our customers that they expect, when they put a planning application into us, that they get a response within the stated timescales, be it 8 weeks or 13 weeks. Exceptionally, if there's a very large scheme or a scheme which requires significant amendments, which should be few and far between, then we should be in a position where we can deliver time extensions. But as I say, that does need to be the exception rather than the rule. So that is something that we are refocusing on. It is about revisiting our processes, but also adding resources where we need to, and reshaping the service that we provide so that we are able to focus on delivering applications in time on a consistent basis. And there's a number of additional statements to make around that. And, you know, absolutely, it's the case that we need to help our applicants to be able to submit things to us that are right first time. And I think that we're not unusual in being council which accepts applications I wouldn't say freely, but we when applications come into us, there are a lot, and we're still trying to get to the bottom of how many or what percentage, but there are a lot of applications that get through the initial validation gateway that aren't right first time. And that leads to a number of issues whereby there is an expectation thereafter for applicants and agents and customers to then submit amendments almost on an unlimited basis. And that isn't helpful to our customers, applicants and agents, because actually they then don't know when they're going to get a final decision. It's not helpful to third parties and communities and neighbours, because applications then potentially drift over extended time periods, and then we get lots of questions about, well, where is this application up to, and when is it going to be determined, and what can I expect? But from a process point of view as well, it's important that we're able to apply quite limited resources, I have to say, as a planning service, and all councils are in the same boat now. We need to be able to have some certainty about the amount of resources that we have to plug into each planning application. It's difficult to do that when we've got this kind of open-ended approach. So we are changing. We are becoming more rigorous in terms of what we will accept. On the same token, we will engage with applicants and agents in a much more proactive way and a much more rigorous way as well with regard to the pre-application service. We know that's something that it has to improve. It is a fee earning part of the planning process. So we are aiming to steer more applicants, agents in that direction, so that the applications that come in through our front door, we're hoping that the quality of those applications will improve over time. And this isn't a switch that we're going to turn on overnight. It is something that we're going to work with our customers on, trying to improve that standard of application as we go. So that's part of the first point. We are getting better at the way we're managing data. We are becoming more business-like. We are becoming more savvy about the information that we're using and reporting. So that's something that, again, is quite a shift. We have a much clearer understanding now, and are continuing to gain that better understanding around throughputs and volume, so that we can more appropriately assign resources in the right places and in a much more flexible way to the workload as it's coming through. So that is something which is really important. And then the other part of the process, which again is absolutely vital to get right, and it touches on what I've already said, is that the part of the process that is registration and validation, so the very front end of the process where the application gets administered, we are resourcing and changing that part of the process so that it becomes more robust. At the moment, the validation timescales are inconsistent, and we absolutely need to have the initial registration validation as the rigorous part of the process at the front end that turns those things around within 48 hours and then feeds it into the planning application process in a consistent way. So that's the, if you like, the process side. The second point, Chair and members, is around the level of engagement and the way we do engagement as a planning service. This is something that when I first arrived to the council, it's something that was certainly relayed to me very clearly in the focus sessions that we had with members, in talking to customers and in talking to fellow officers and senior officers, that we need to work harder on engagement. And that's something which we've started to do. So internally, we are operating a much more rigorous approach now towards meetings, both with all staff, which we do on a regular monthly basis, with all teams that we do on a monthly basis. We now have got regular managerial meetings, so that they take place as briefings and as open sessions, which then get fed down into staff. And we're running that on a monthly time scale, so they repeat every month. So that is much more effective in terms of addressing some of the issues internally. We've also introduced regular sessions with applicants and agents as an agents forum. That meets on I think it's a bi-monthly basis, Nick. I'm sure you'll correct me, and that's something where we're beginning to engage more effectively around the level of service that we offer and the depth of service that we offer, and we've been getting some feedback on that. Very interested in members' comments, if there are comments this evening, in terms of the level of external engagement that we need to be carrying out. So obviously it's something that is important, because you've told us that as councillors and community representatives. It is something that we need to think about how we resource that and move forward with that. And as I say, I'd be very interested in comments on that issue. So I think that on the final part of the engagement area is around being better at responding to customer inquiries and service requests and ultimately complaints. It's something that we know we can do better on. It's something that we are investing time in. Clearly, we've got to prioritise, so we're still not there yet, but that is something that we are working on, and we know we've got to improve in that area, and we will report back both to Planning Improvement Board in the future and also to members, if required, on the wider work on that service request and complaint response issue. And then the third point is around strategic planning and place shaping. And this manifests itself primarily in the local plan, which members will be very aware of, but also in the other work that we do across neighbourhood planning and other areas, which I won't go into now in detail, but it's something which is absolutely fundamental to the council in terms of moving forward with its place shaping and investment strategy, and to make sure that the local plan is able to progress in a way which reflects the council's ambitions as well as the community's ambitions is absolutely vital. The local plan service at the moment is small. There are a number of skill gaps and there's a number of areas where we need to invest. It's important that, as I say, that local plan is able to reflect ambitions, but also be instrumental in capturing the key elements of the vision for the future of BCP, both across the community, but also from an investment and particularly from the point of view of bringing in and facilitating future investment and growth and jobs and regeneration. It's vital that we get that right and invest in it, and that's something that we are looking to do more work on and to provide extra and additional skills and resources in that area. And absolutely importantly, we recognise that with the council's new regeneration company, urban regeneration company coming into fruition, that again is something that we need to align and be aligned with, so that any delivery policies that are emerging from the URC, that the planning services is absolutely aligned to that. Chair, I've spoken for a while. The final thing to say is that there are a number of actions and targets which flow from the report, and they are detailed in paragraph 41, where there is a table giving some indications of what those actions and targets and timetables might look like. And I won't go into the recommendations. They are in the report and are clear. There are a number of financial implications, which again I won't go into in detail, but be happy to answer any questions or make any further comments. And at that point, I'll just hand over to Nick to add anything further, and then happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Perrins. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, committee. Good to see you all. Yeah, I haven't got too much to add to that. It's been a good explanation of where we are. I'll just make the point that a lot of work has been going on over the last 6 months. We've done a lot of work at uncovering the issues. We're now kind of moving into the solving aspect of the project, and things are starting to move in the positive. You know, there's a huge amount of work still to be done. But as the report sets out, we're doing all the various activities. We're investing in new systems, new process. You know, all the right things are in there, and we're bringing new resources in. So I think it's great that the council is supporting the planning service. That's really good. So thank you to the council for that. Part of that resource plan is our recruitment drive, which is underway at the moment. We have a live recruitment underway. We have a website set up, and we're hoping to attract some really good candidates. So overall, over the next 6 months, for those actions which Colin finished up on, you know, we are moving the service into a more positive place. But you know, very interested to hear members' feedback and further suggestions. So maybe if I hand back to yourself, Chair, to do that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Perez. Maybe I could just kick it off then. So since we last discussed this at this board, the phase has been about identifying what the shortfalls are and maybe what the improvements that are required are. It's been about identifying the issues more than actually solving things. Am I right in saying that broadly? I know that there are obviously some actions, positive actions. I mean, we have a new service director, for example, in Colin. So obviously some issues have been addressed. But can you tell me what sort of real progress has been made over the last 6 months in terms of, getting to grips with some of the issues that the public have with the service?
Yes.
I'll address that to you. Yes, Mr. Perrins, I'll address that to you. You're at the coal face.
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right, Chair. There has been a big exercise in identifying the problems from the previous paper, and I think in terms of what things are actually happening here and now, the engagement piece. We are seeking to be much more responsive with our customers. We can't always do it, so there will be examples where we haven't been responding as quick as we can, but we'll be very mindful of that. We've talked to the teams as part of that kind of monthly internal engagement. We've talked to the staff about the importance of being responsive. So we'd like to think that in many cases people have seen an improvement in that. We're also being more decisive in decision making, and that's starting to happen already in terms of we just need to get some decisions out. We can't always negotiate everything all the time, and I think some customers will feel the benefit of that, and some obviously may not agree with what the approach, but at least they respect that we're doing something and making a decision. So our things are happening here and now in the moment, and obviously more work is going to happen on that in terms of we're going to do a further protocol about how we handle applications and set out the expectations which customers can expect from us. And we've also looked at just generally the sort of the management side of the planning application process in particular. We brought in an interim manager that person's in place and has been in place for the last few weeks, and that is starting to be positive in terms of how the customer experience the planning service. I'm not saying that we're nowhere near there, but I think the customers will have started to feel the positive effects of the measures we put in place. So I hope that helps, Chair.
Thank you. Just to follow on that, and so effectively we've been identifying what the issues are, and I would have thought that from the Planning Improvement Board's perspective in particular, that you would now have a list of all the things that you need to put in place, and they will have some kind of time frame associated with them, and you will have some kind of project plan, project improvement plan that we can all look at to see what needs to be done, when it's going to be done, and who's going to do it. Would I be right in saying that?
You would be right. We do have a project plan. Part of it is set out in summary at the back of the committee report before the council or the committee today. But there is obviously a more detailed version of that, which is governed by the Planning Improvement Board. Yes.
Okay, well, that's really good news to hear. I'm just going to come back on one point, if I may, and this is about the agreed. One of the clear issues here, because there's a lot of information in the report about it, are the number of applications where the timescales have been extended by an agreement, and that's not taken into account in terms of the performance figures that you reflect, because they actually assume that the agreements are there. So yes, the table does look as if we're performing in accordance or to the government standards, but as the report says, that doesn't reflect what's actually happening because of the number of extended agreements that you have. But the problem I have with this is that I can't quantify that because I haven't got the data. This board cannot really see if there's been any improvement at all. Because that improvement, is it correct to say that improvement has been generated by just getting more time scale agreements out? And it's fairly fundamental to the whole thing. We can't really tell how well the department is performing because we're not taking that into account, and we can't see that information. Am I right in that assumption?
Chair, if I may, yes, that is that is one way to look at it. I think it's important to recognise that this is the way all councils report their figures to government. So, you know, BCP are not alone in reporting the statistics in that way. It is an accepted way of reporting those statistics. And the key point of setting out those statistics in some ways is just to reassure the council that the council is not in danger of any special intervention measures from government, because that is obviously a, you know, that nobody want to be in that position. So on the one hand, you know, we're giving reassurance that there's no danger of that from a corporate reputational point of view. But on the other hand, yes, obviously there are, you know, quite a few extensions of time in the system. But many of those extensions of time, they're agreed willingly by the applicant. So it's not always an indication that performance is necessarily bad. You know, quite often both parties agree it and it's okay to find a solution. But absolutely, we do look at the raw data behind both. You know, it's useful to see both, and we are using that to drive the improvements. Ultimately, we want to get to a position where we use extensions of time very rarely, rather than, you know, sometimes quite often. So yes.
Okay, I understand that, but my concern isn't so much with the presentation of figures to government. It's about the reputation of the council with our residents who are actually paying for the services, and that's the issue. And we can't really address the extent of the problem that we have because we don't see the data on the number of time extensions that have been agreed. And at the end of the day, the customer really hasn't got a lot of choice to see. They're going to say they want the planning consent, and they're obviously going to agree in most cases. Anyway, I won't labour this any longer. I think Councillor Slade wants to come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the points I wanted to make. I was looking on the government figures, and yeah, absolutely, that's how they're reported to government. And it's great that there's no risk of us being reported to government or having them come down. But I'm more bothered by my resident who is absolutely pulling their hair out because, you know, one of them contacted me last week on the week before the extension was about to run out. They were then told, oh, yes, we're going to farm it out to a locum. And I was just at the point of saying, come on, this is getting ridiculous. And suddenly, you know, the decision came. It feels very last minute. I've got one case, which is a relatively minor application that's been in the system for 1 year and 6 months. And I can't understand why that sort of minor application is not closed down or decided. It feels to me like it's not helpful. So I would like to ask that when we have future reports, that from our own point of view, actually a breakdown of how many applications are dealt with within the 8 or 13 weeks original timescale, and the direction of travel would be a really helpful thing. I'm wondering whether we know the answer around how many applicants exercise the right for a appeal by non-determination, because I think that's an indication of people who are not happy with the fact that they've been asked to extend. There's a couple of other things that I'm concerned about. Is you talked about the local plan team. I've also had concerns about the level of support available for neighbourhood plans. They're supposed to have a dedicated support officer to help them, and that is very difficult to actually get that support. Obviously, neighbourhood plans have to be updated in line with the local plan. So, you know, what's being done to support that? The other thing that I'm a little bit disappointed with, in the engagement section, it talks about improved communications. And I've got two problems there. One is there's no mention of the improved communications with our residents about them being able to get alerts in terms of applications within a postcode or within an area, which was something we've talked about for 2.5 years. I realise that might require an IT solution, but there's no ambition for it shown in here. And at the same time as that, there is a recommendation in here to delegate to the head of planning and the portfolio holder to review and implement changes with how we communicate with residents, which looks to me like the plan is to stop doing the neighbour letters, which we
refused to do in 2019 and in 2020 because it wasn't in the best interest of residents. And now it looks like it's going to be a portfolio holder decision, and I'm really concerned about that. That does not feel like a council that's genuinely wants to communicate. I don't think anything like that should be done until an alternative method is found, so that residents can opt in to getting automatic responses within their area. And the final concern I've got is you talked about the URC. I'm interested to know a bit more about your relationship with the URC. You talked about how the planning system needs to align with the values of the URC. I might suggest it's the other way around. The planning authority is the planning authority, and I don't like the sound of the council aligning itself with an arm's length body to suit the arm's length body. So I'm hoping I've misunderstood that, but I'd be very unhappy if the URC had a bigger relationship with the planning authority than every other developer and household applicant in the conurbation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slade. Right, there's quite a few points there. I think maybe Colin, the last point about the URC is probably one for you, and as Councillor Broadhead wants to respond to that. Councillor Broadhead, you're nodding away.
Could I go first on that point, if I could, because I wouldn't want anybody that was listening in, the way that was portrayed by Councillor Slade would sound quite worrying. If I was a resident hearing that you know, an arm's length company could dictate how planning is going to be in the area, that's quite a worrying statement, isn't it? What we need to remember, as we keep reiterating, Future Places is a wing of the council. It is our regeneration arm, is essentially what we're trying to create with that. It is our strategic function, where we're going to direct a lot of the kind of curation of our policy, as well as come up with plans for our own sites of how we move to the future. And I think, you know, Colin, you know, can explain a bit further. But first of all, I would expect and want to see that our planning service can react to the level of aspirations that we have in the regeneration arena, full stop, whether that's our own stuff or whether that's others. So absolutely we have to be aligned, particularly on the level of scale that we want to operate on, but also considering they're not an arm's length company that you know is owned by somebody else or a JV or anything like that. It is essentially our regen function that we are calling Future Places. I think it's absolutely integral that they're embedded close with the planning team, particularly when we're looking at things like the curation of our local plan and new planning policies going forward. We don't want that done in isolation. We don't want that done with, you know, in co-creation with where we see the future, and using all the experience that we have throughout the council, whether that be in Future Places or our transport teams or anywhere else. So I think it's really important that they actually work really closely with Future Places, and let's not fall into the trap of thinking that Future Places is this, you know, kind of mythical body that has some kind of association with the council. It's our regen wing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm going in reverse order here, but the points that Councillor Slade's made, just turning to the one about improvement of communications and the alerts to residents, and the suggestion in the report about delegation to review the system of notifying residents, etc. I spotted that in the report, I must admit, and I thought, hang on, we've been through this at least twice before, and when we've gone through it, we you know, what our residents were asking for was improved communication, not less. And you know, the thought of relying on a notice pinned on a lamppost, I'm afraid, is you know, to me is completely alien. But the point I'd like to make is that would probably require a change in the constitution in order to accommodate that, and it would be a matter for an A&G board decision, I think, rather than having it as a delegated decision. I think I might not be right about that, but I just got a feeling it would be an A&G issue. So I don't know if you just want to comment on that one first. Who would that be? Would that be with you? Well, Phil has disappeared, so Colin, yeah, thank you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's nothing Machiavellian, I can assure you, about the way it was worded or the intention here. I think the simple response is that we know that at the moment it's not working fantastically well. we know that we want to go away and review it to find a way find a methodology that meets community needs and also the bring it into the 21st century as the councillor referred to, whether that's alerts, whether it's something else. I think that we need to do some further work on that and come to a sort of recommended position on it. How that works in governance terms, then happy to take advice on that. The suggestion was that that's subject to a portfolio holder decision is obviously one way of doing it. If members recommend something, a different approach, then happy to support that. I think what I would say is that we are doing things at the moment which are quite resource intensive. It's one of the things which is slowing us down at the moment in terms of our decision-making capacity. We need to review it because it is soaking up a lot of resource, and also it's not a system at the moment which is robust. So we're not looking to downgrade, we're not looking to reduce, we're not looking to make financial savings just for making financial savings. This is about introducing an approach which works for all parties really in the most efficient and effective way. We don't know what the outcome of that will be yet. We need to go away and do some work on that and then get to a conclusion. So as I say, Chair, there was absolutely nothing Machiavellian about it. It was simply a line of business that we need to review as part of the overall planning operation.
Thank you. The first point that Councillor Slade made was about the future reports, that we do get information on the number of people that do not exercise their right, that do not exercise their right, and what the implication, and both actually, how many do exercise their right for an extension or time extension, and how many then exercise their right to non-determination as well. So it would be interesting to see those measures. And whilst I'm on the subject, I don't think today we're going to get to the end of this review of the planning improvements required. And I've noticed from the timescales that there's an aim to finish a lot of these in January. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that we actually put this on the forward plan again for February of next year. So we do get a chance to review the progress made against the plan that you have. And in that plan, we would hope to see the data that we don't see at the moment, so we can get some kind of feel for the progressive improvements that we're looking for. The last point that Councillor Slade made was about the support for neighbourhood plans, and is that difficult for us to staff, or could you just give us a few words on what support is available for that?
Yeah, just Chair, if I may, just jump in there. I think that just on the data issue, then absolutely we can go away and bring that in a more cogent way into any future meeting. I think what I would say is data is data and it can be misinterpreted. So we will take a look at that. And obviously the Planning Improvement Board gets the raw data that shows a number of things, and it's not, we're not trying to hide anything here, but at the same time, it's important that members are able to understand the nuances. Because as Nick touched on, not everybody wants a decision in 8 weeks. Not everybody wants a decision in 13 weeks. And there's a large group of people that actually would quite like to put an application in which is half formed and then negotiate it to get to something in 6 months' time that is an approval. So I think that is something which isn't helpful to us. It's not helpful to third parties, and that's something that we are looking to change our approach on. So I think that we just need to put a caveat on some of that data that we will bring you, but we'll have a think about how we best present that. There was a question about non-determination. The numbers of, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but again, we can provide that. The numbers of non-determination appeals are very low nationally. I'm sure that figure is reflected in BCP. The numbers that I'm aware of are minuscule, if not very small. Generally, it is a course of absolute last resort for an applicant because Not only do they get to the end of the line with the council as far as process goes, at the moment there are significant delays in the planning inspectorate appeal process as well. They have got a significant turnaround time, so which could be into 6 months plus. So I'm not aware of that being a significant issue in BCP. As I say, the numbers nationally are very low as well. The question, Chair, around the neighbourhood plans, absolutely, we recognise the importance and the significance of neighbourhood plans, and they still remain and feature large both in the national government landscape of planning policy, but also in our own landscape of planning policy. It is something that it is a challenge to resource, not just here, but in every council. Clearly, it is not the local plan, and clearly we have to prioritise in terms of where we are able to place resources. It is something that, as part of our review process and our revisitation of the structure, that is something that we do intend to revisit. I can't say at the moment, members, whether a dedicated resource or whether a combination of resource would be the most appropriate way of delivering the service, but what I would say is that we are committed to delivering and continuing to deliver a service around neighbourhood plans. That is something that we will go away and consider further and factor that into our review process and restructure process, as well as thinking about how we can continue to both resource at current levels, but also add resource through the various funding regimes that are available. So I think that I absolutely appreciate where members are coming from on this, but I also appreciate the absolute necessity to move forward with our local plan. So it is always a balancing act, Chair. So I think that's covered the points, but happy to add anything further if needed.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say I was slightly disappointed when I saw the report that we couldn't really see the extent of the problems we've got because we didn't have all the information in terms of the number of time extensions agreed. Because without that information, we can't really make an assessment as to how things are actually improving because we can't see that. The other key issue, and you do touch on it in the report, is that of complaints. So I'd be interested to know how the numbers of complaints are being monitored, where they come from, how you're fed complaints. Do they come from customer services? Do they come directly into the department or both? And how are we tracking the improvement in performance by monitoring the number of, looking at the number of the complaints? And there's probably a question for Councillor Broadhead. What is the Planning Improvement Board doing in terms of monitoring the improvement? How are you monitoring the improvements that the department are actually implementing? So that's a question for Councillor Broadhead. Yeah, let's get Councillor Broadhead to answer that question first. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. And as Colin has pointed out, it's a really robust process that we've been following with the Planning Improvement Board. It's attended by myself, the Chief Exec, the COO, the Monitoring Officer, as well as Colin and Nick as well. So it's the kind of the top people at the table, and I hope to give assurance to the board that we've delved really deep into a lot of these areas. And no kind of stone has gone unturned. The other thing that we've been focusing on is what comes next as well, and there's not a tremendous amount in this report as well around the kind of Colin's done a fantastic job of kind of the state of play, but also around what this new service is going to look like and all the different permutations of how we're actually going to fix some of these issues as well. What I might do, with your indulgence, Chair, is bring in Graham Farrant, who is on the call and has just offered. I mean, he is actually the chair of the Planning Improvement Board, so perhaps he can give you the assurance of the type of thing that board has been looking at that I sit on as well.
Yeah, good evening, Chief Executive. It's nice to see you this evening. And
thank you, Chairman.
Just go ahead.
Thank you. It's just the first time I switched my camera on, but I'm here listening, monitoring what's going on and seeing how the debate's going. And so, as chair of the Improvement Board, I've been really clear that we need to see the sort of management information that you've been talking about. I have to say it has been more complex than any of us would have thought to get the information out, because we're still working with 3 different systems. We need to get comparable data, and we need to get information that is genuine and up to date. But we've been doing exactly that, exactly as you've been suggesting as Chair of Review and Scrutiny, looking at the numbers. I can see there has been a difference. I can see some of the older cases are beginning to get knocked off the list. I can see some proposals going forward for more focused activity on decision making. So I think that the officer team has really got to grips with it, and particularly over the last few months, I think we've seen that grip beginning to result in some improved performance. Now, you know, it's really difficult because there's always a balance between the wish for speed and actually, you know, to make it really clear, we all want planning applications delivered, decisions delivered as quickly as possible, because that's how we derive the economic benefit. You don't derive the economic benefit from somebody having some uncertain plans. You derive that from somebody getting plans in place, getting things built and getting jobs created, or homes improved, or whatever the outcome is. So we are really clear on that. And then that's balanced against planning need, planning policy, etc. So that we've been trying to push that balance more and more onto the performance management, whilst respecting the need to keep those planning constraints in place. So I can see that progress. Very happy to bring some more information to you. But my sense from what I've seen is over the next 8 weeks leading up to Christmas, we will see, it's only 6 weeks leading up to Christmas now, isn't it? We'll see more of those improvements, particularly with that focus on making decisions and getting those decisions out the door.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've just got one more before I'm going to ask Councillor Hadley to come in, and this is to Colin. You're talking about limited resource. You mentioned it again just now, it's in the report. Are you getting all the resources you need in order to put in place the corrective actions that you want? Have you got the support of the Improvement Board, and are you getting the financial backing to go with it?
I think the simple answer is yes, Chair. I think the caveat to that is that clearly there is an evidence-based approach. So we're not just here to ask for more resources endlessly. Absolutely understand that there needs to be a clear justification and a business case made at every stage. And that is a discipline that we are becoming stronger on, understanding that there does need to be a much more business-like and business case-based approach. But absolutely, when we have needed to inject further resources, we have taken that to the board and we've justified the case for those resources. And in every case so far, those resources or those requests have been approved. I'm not anticipating that we are likely to be going back with further requests. If there is, then clearly we would again need to make a business case and also refer to the potential sources of income. But at the moment, the answer is yes, Chair. The resources that we've needed to date have been supplied.
Thank you. That's really good news. Councillor Hadley, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. 3 things, if I may. The first one is at paragraph 41, we have the list of actions and targets. And I noticed the second one has a target of November 2021, ensuring new application to process made mainly within the statutory period. But I guess it's about the whole table, really, in terms of the plan being smart, identifiable objectives that have baselines and dates and actions. So, you know, how do we know? And it does come back to what Chief Executive just talked about. But in terms of, you know, the streamlining the recruiting to sort that front end, has it been sorted? What is the, you know, are we down to 2 days in general? And that's the sort of information I think you're asking for. Tied to that was the comment I think Colin raised in the start around pre-applications and the fact that pre-applications are a fee-based service, and maybe that makes it a disincentive for people to use that rather than, as was suggested, putting in a partially developed application, tying up our officer time to refine that and perfect it before it actually gets to the point of approval. So I just wonder whether we've got a perverse incentive there for creating extra work for our staff rather than perhaps adopting a fee-paying service, and whether there's a fine that goes with having a partially filled application. And I know to my cost, working with Companies House, you know, they fine you for being late if you don't manage to get the application perfect first time. So where there's some balancing stick that we could be using there. And then the third one really was the 334,000 additional temporary funding this year, and we're now in November. So I don't know whether this has already been committed and we're asking retrospectively for it, or whether this is people that are going to be recruited. But we've only got 4 months left of the year, and if we're recruiting, that's probably 2 or 3 months left of the year. So how do we need such a big amount of money this late in the year to be added? Thank you.
I think that's probably for Councillor Broadhead. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Chair. The last question about the finances, I think it might well be Colin or Nick better placed to answer. I know definitively that we've sourced the funding, so there's no kind of additional in-year ask on the wider budget. But I think it's down to the current staffing recruitment that we're going through at the moment. But they could probably give it a little bit more information.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Please, Colin, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, it's fairly simple response in that this is a current stated position of the likely level of projected spend beyond the original approved budget. Clearly, members already, through Cabinet, have agreed a certain level of spend beyond the original budget earlier in the year. So this gives a current reporting position on where we are in terms of projected spend. Clearly, when we are going through change as a service, there is a cost. There is a transitional cost, not least because when we go through a restructure process, we don't fill vacancies, but to keep the service running, we need to bring additional staff in. Those additional staff cost money because they are short-term agency. They come at a higher cost, unfortunately, than permanent paid staff. So that is a short-term transitionary cost that we are having to bear at the moment, as well as other additional elements that we've had to plug into the service to get us over the number of transitional changes that we've made this year. So it is we're anticipating a worst case scenario. In terms of how that additional spend is being covered, I think the report states that we are looking to use a combination of different approaches, not least of which is looking at the amount of money that we hold in reserve as a service. Clearly, if we use reserves, we need to look at how we readdress them over future years, but there is nothing amiss with the principle of using those resources in times of stress or service stress when we need to apply them to be able to get the service over the line in terms of its transition this year. I hope that answers the question, Chair. I think there was another question about timescales. This is inevitably, this report is a summary. And the table in paragraph 41 is inevitably a summary. As Nick hinted at earlier, there is a more detailed set of timescales that sits behind this. And clearly, timescales are there as a guide. Inevitably, when you intervene on one area, there are implications which arise across others. So it is a bit of a work in progress around what that plan looks like and what interventions we're making, and also what priorities that we're working on and what impacts that also makes on other elements of the overall change plan. So apologies, sir, that is a summary. We can provide more detail if that's needed. And then the final point on pre-apps, absolutely, in response, that is an element of the service that we need to work on and get more right, so that applicants are willing to use it, because at the moment I think that there is an unwillingness, not because of the fee necessarily, but just about the robustness of the service and the depth of response that applicants get from that element of the service, which isn't right at the moment. There's very little consequence at the moment, or previously, if applicants don't engage with pre-app and they just put an application in, and then they can then, as we said, take 6 months to work through the process. And that unfortunately costs us money to do that, more in most cases inevitably than the planning fee we receive, sometimes many times more than the planning fee. That isn't a great way of doing business. So as Graham said, we do need to get much more robust in terms of our turnaround times. We need to get better at the pre-app service and resource that adequately. that is a fee-paying element of the service. There's nothing to say that we can't vary those fees accordingly, depending on the scale of the application or the level of service, or indeed premium service that we apply to that pre-app process. So that is something which is under review at the present time, and we will come back through the Planning Improvement Board to provide further information on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to...
Yes, I guess, sorry, thank you, Chair. The question, I suppose, around that final one was about incentives not to use the full process as an iterative process. So is there anything we can do in terms of the stick to support the carrot for getting the pre-app better?
I think through you, Chair, I think there are a number of approaches which vary from the very controversial and hard-hitting to the soft touch and the coaching and encouraging. And I think that's something that we need to think about. And it might be that we use a more robust approach for a period of time and then move to a different approach once we've got things perhaps more robust and we've got people used to dealing with our robust process. So I think there is no one right answer. I mean, some councils that I've operated in operate a one chance approach, for instance. So they will provide one opportunity for an applicant or an agent to amend a scheme before they get a final decision. I'm not advocating that. That's one option. Some councils operate an approach on majors where if they are very strongly encouraged or required to enter into pre-apps, if they don't enter into pre-app and put a scheme in which isn't acceptable, then the council may go straight to a refusal. Again, I'm not advocating that approach. Or indeed, if an applicant goes through pre-app and ignores the advice or the recommendations, then again, the council, in some cases, may move to a swifter decision, which may be a refusal. Now, they are all options, and I think that we need to consider all those options, and think about actually which ones may be the most appropriate for how we need to both facilitate investment and growth, but also maintain what is great in BCP and also maintain the protection for our communities that we value. I think we need to get the balance right, and I think that's something that we need to take away and think about and discuss, and also communicate and engage external customers on what the right balance of approach is to pre-app, and how we move forward into the corresponding approach towards how we deal with applications in the future.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. The title of this is Planning Service Improvement Update, but I do feel a whole chunk has been missed from this because I can only find the word enforcement once. And our residents contact us quite often where something is being built, but it's not actually being built as to what their planning application was approved for. So enforcement is a really important part of our planning service. So I would have liked to have known how many enforcement inquiries we get, how many enforcement officers we have, and if we don't have enough, are they being recruited as part of the 29 people that you say are being recruited?
Any volunteers? Nick, thank you.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Enforcement, a critical part of the service, no doubt about it. Enforcement's actually it's the team which has moved the quickest in terms of adding staff. And it's been through the early part of the recruitment process, and we filled the jobs. Some of those staff are turning up in a few weeks' time, but that team has definitely been resourced up, and it's actually one of the most effective parts of the service at the moment. Very responsive, and by and large, it hasn't been identified as a huge issue. But obviously, we can bring more back to the next paper in the next meeting around the enforcement service and things like the data around cases and response times, the staffing, and what we've done in that area. But absolutely agree, it's critical. It's just hasn't been the focus because it's performing relatively well actually compared to some of the other areas.
Thank you. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I was just making yet another little note. Yes, Very interesting report, and obviously a lot of work is being done. I find the business of the time extensions really concerning. We've got a lot over our way where people are complaining about it. And I do see the point in, well, we can't blame the applicants. This is what worries me. And I do feel that perhaps the pre-app fee puts people off and then they muddle through. And usually we're talking about people that do this once in a lifetime. You know, you want to build something on, you have to get a plan in. So I think I wouldn't like to be too draconian with what we do with that. I think the officer was talking about various ways of solving it. One of the things that does come out in this is recruitment, which I would have thought was the most urgent part of all this, because if you haven't got enough people, whatever the service is like, you can't run it. And I'd really like to know if we're able to recruit people. Are they going to live down here? Are they going to work locally? What inducements we can give them, but I know perhaps that's not a question for this particular forum. And I would point out as well that the merger was supposed to cut the staffing, and now we find we've got too few. So, which seems a bit difficult to take in. On the reduction, in the notification of applications, a possible reduction, I think other councillors have said I'm totally against reducing that service. It's not much of a service anyway. It's only notices on a lamppost, and it does, as we know, in the summary of equality implications, it does have an equality implication. But I do trust that when this is looked at, it will be looked at very, very thoroughly, because we have to remember that we are running a service. It's not all about cost cutting. And then, sorry, can I just go on quickly to communications and engagement, which does seem, from what has been said, that it seems to be a lot of internal improvement of communications or with agents. And I'd like to point out from my own personal area that I think we need to include parishes when we're talking about communications. Local knowledge is really vital. Then there was a mention in the report of too many major applications in the system. And I'd like to know, well, I'd like to be reassured that that will be included in the review of how this is solved. Because I'm not quite sure what page it's on now, but we're talking about a review of the whole planning structure, which is to be completed by the end of December 21. And I'm really interested to know whether that has already started. I assume it has, but who will see it and where they're getting information from for this, partly to do with what is following on in this in the next report. If there are too many majors in the system, there are a lot of ways of solving that by doing things differently, changing the structure. So yes, I'm interested in who is doing that, where it is going and where the information is coming from. And I'd just like to really comment on what Councillor Broadhead said about on another tranche of this. We have the top people at the table. Now, in my experience, that isn't always the right approach. It isn't always the top people that know quite what's going wrong. So, but I'm sure they'll get it sorted eventually. But I would like to say and stress that this whole planning department is a service. I think that's what we really need to understand. We are giving a service. And the other thing, can I just finish off? All the officers that I speak to, and I do have to speak to a lot of them, are absolutely wonderful. They're doing a brilliant job in the face of what we are discovering is problems. And I really would like to mark that they work very hard. Okay, thanks very much, Chairman. I don't think there was any question there, was there? I think I was just debating with myself, really.
Okay, fine, thank you. Who have we got? Councillor Millie.
Thank you, Chair. I was really pleased with what Mr. Perez said at the beginning of that about, being a bit more, you didn't use the word ruthless, but being more decisive with applications. I think that's really good, because it's often when people get into that muddy area 6 months down the line and they don't have any recourse to appeal, that they're sort of left in limbo. But I have another question really, which is something I've very recently come across. In my ward, I've had the first example I've ever seen of what's called twin tracking, which is when applicants submit duplicate applications to force the planning authority into speeding up the process because of the threat of going to appeal for the non-determination of the duplicate application. Now, this probably means like it's way clearer to you guys, but it seems to be a really clear measure of where a planning system or a planning authority is struggling to cope. And we've got big developers coming in and using the system to their advantage, basically jumping ahead of your regular, you know, householders who are just putting in little applications for changes. And what I'm really worried about is not just the confusion for residents in that they have to then submit lots of responses to applications, but also that the officer time is then soaked up having to deal with 2 applications. So I just wanted to ask if there's any sort of evidence of that kind of thing in BCP, and if there's any way we can stop it just to save that resource.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that one for you, Mr. Perrin?
Yes, I can certainly view if that would be helpful, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, twin tracking. Yeah, it's a very interesting question, that, and it's not. As a general rule, it doesn't happen very often. It's not something which is happening, you know, across the piece, and sometimes it's actually done with good intentions, or at least from the developer's point of view, it gives them options. You know, for example, if they got say 2 refusals on a twin track approach, they can appeal one, but then they can also then reapply on the second one as well on a free go. So it's not always designed to disrupt the local planning authority. Sometimes it's just it's an approach which they feel gives them better options going forward. I mean, ideally, it doesn't ever happen. You don't need to use the second application for any kind of appeal or anything. So it can be a tool. It's not hugely prevalent as a strategy in BCP area. It does happen. Maybe offline, Councillor Earl, I'd have a look at that one for you if you want to send me the details to see if there's anything more in it. But there's nothing we can do to stop it. That's the other point. You know, an applicant can decide and apply, you know, however many times they like, and it's just something which will have to be dealt with. It doesn't necessarily always add loads of resource if you're doing it's essentially 1 application, albeit with 2 admin process behind it in terms of numbers. It adds a bit more time about sending out letters and site notices, but by and large we treat it just as 1 application, and we deal with both at the same time. So hopefully that was helpful, and I'm happy to have a look at the example offline if you'd like, Councillor Earl.
Thank you very much. A couple more questions. That, you know, clearly, you know, you're trying to make improvements, but at the same time, we have this very important transformation program going on throughout the council. We have our smarter structures, and I guess I'd like to understand if those programs are affecting your ability to move forward to the place you want to be in. Now, I would imagine that smarter structures doesn't play too much of a part in that. I'm not sure, maybe you could answer the question, but the transformation program, in particularly in terms of the dependency on IT and IT systems, how much of that plays a part in where you need to be as a service? Is that probably for you, Colin? Is it?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think there's probably 2 parts to that question. I think that absolutely IT is fundamental. And we are inevitably still running with 3 separate IT systems, well, in fact, more than that, because we've also got, we've got separate systems across our area teams, as well as separate overlaying graphical mapping systems. So it's not helpful at the moment. We absolutely know that we need to move on with pace so that we operate as a single entity and a single process. That is an ongoing project that we are making several breakthroughs on at the moment, and we've made several breakthroughs on, and we are now moving forward at a faster pace. I have to say, I think it's more about process rather than IT. The IT is clearly a help to us in terms of how we do our business and how we move on, but it's not the panacea. And I think that, you know, it's also about reviewing how we do things and aligning them so that things are operating as a single production line rather than 3 production lines. You know, there are multiple complications around that because that does span, the planning application process spans multiple business areas. So we've got the registration validation across our business port. That is an opportunity, I think, to be able to get increased efficiencies. We just need to align those things in a more efficient and effective way, which is, again, is work which is ongoing. So yeah, I think IT is important. We are about to sign a contract with a new software supplier within the matter of days. We are talking in depth with that supplier about how that program will pan out and trying to win back time on the implementation timescale for that. So, and we also do hope to be able to introduce some improvements in terms of customer accessibility, so that tracking applications and also notifications in future will be able to become much more automatic and much more user-friendly and customer-friendly. So absolutely, Chair. I think on the structural question, then I think that we've been through the Smarter Structures process. We're still in there. We know what that structure is likely to be. We're recruiting as we speak to 29 vacancies. In fact, we're making progress on that, and we have a microsite out at the moment online as part of that process. So it's early days yet to bring in those staff in, but hopefully by Christmas we'll have got through that initial phase. I think that what has become clear is that that probably didn't go far enough, and in the report you'll see that there is a clear reference to the need to move to a further version which provides a more in-depth focus on a number of key business lines and key areas, including things like major applications that we've identified as being business critical, and also including making sure that our resources and the right skills are in the right places, not just in development management and enforcement, but also in areas such as the local plan, and making sure that that is absolutely fit for purpose. So this is I wouldn't say another review. Well, it is another review. It will be an in-depth review. We haven't decided on how far it will go yet. And that's something that we're talking to our human resources colleagues about as to the mechanism behind that. But we are intending to move swiftly so that we are able to be in a position where we've got a really robust, clear setup in terms of both leadership and also in terms of staffing resources and operating it as a very efficient business going into the next year. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Members, anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we've been at that an hour and a quarter. It doesn't time fly when you're having fun. Yeah, you've clearly got a challenge ahead, and you know, to just bring 3 different authorities together under one planning system is really a bit of a challenge. Yet alone to have to do that with the COVID period in between, and of course the transformation programs, Smarter Structures, lots of things thrown into the pie here. So yeah. What I would like to echo some of the comments being made about the planning officers. We know that they're working under difficult situations, and they do have a difficult job. They have to be so precise in what they're doing. We do appreciate that. We do thank them for their work, and we thank you for the work that you're doing, and the Planning Improvement Board to try to resolve some of the issues. So we look forward now to seeing an updated report in February when all the programme will be finished according to your project plan here. So let's wait and see. But thank you for attending this evening, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Which now brings us to item number 6, which is the Planning Committee structure, which was put on the forward plan at the request of one of our residents and representative of Mr. Bob Hutchins from Highcliffe and Walford Parish Council, who made a request to put it on overview and scrutiny panel, board rather. So, Mr. Hutchins, good evening to you. Welcome. And could I ask you to tell us why you believe the planning committee structure should be changed? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to put forward the case that we think you should operate the planning committee as 3 committees rather than 1. I must apologise for the fact I've been popping in and out of your meeting for the last hour and a quarter. I've got a lot going on in my home at the moment. I may have to pop out again in a few minutes, but I'll try to get this done before I do that. I don't intend to take up a lot of your time today, partly because I've already had several opportunities to explain our request to members, partly because I don't think my voice is going to stand up for very long. The main issue I'd like to highlight tonight is that there is a lack of confidence in the system. That's what got the 5 local councils involved in the first place. At parish level, what our residents are telling us is that if the planning committee is considering a Bournemouth or a Poole application, they really don't believe that Christchurch councillors can offer a great deal of expertise. And by the same token, and this is in no way disparaging of anyone on any of the committee, they don't have confidence that a Poole councillor or a Bournemouth councillor will be familiar with the idiosyncrasies of development in, say, Christchurch. The request that we're making is not all about money. Our consultant never suggested that it was. And in any event, I think however you organise your committee structure, we all know you're only talking about a very modest level of costs. Nor do we say that having 1 committee is necessarily the wrong way to do it. 4 of the comparator authorities that our consultant looked at operate with 1 committee, but 12 others don't. They operate with 1, with 2 or more committees. And we believe that there would be a massive boost in public confidence in the system if BCP were to change from 1 to 3 committees. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really am content to leave this matter now for your consideration. There's nothing more I think I can add that hasn't already been said by us. I hope you can accept that the motives of the 5 parishes are entirely apolitical. We've been driven simply by desire to see the service improved and also, perhaps more importantly, better understood and respected by our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Hutchins. Now, before we open it up for debate, I'd just like to call in Head of Planning, Mr. Perrins, just to give a response to the comments made by Mr. Hutchins. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I do understand the issues. I understand the concerns being raised in the report. I think at this stage we haven't, had a huge amount of time to consider it or provide a counter view. But I would just say that from my point of view, the planning committee, the BCP planning committee, is very effective. It's a single planning committee. I haven't seen any evidence of the wrong decisions being made. I think all the councillors enter into it in fantastic spirits. There are no sort of issues with location in terms of where councillors come from. They apply the policies as they are on the plans. So from my point of view, I think it's highly effective. It's working well. And I don't see a particular case for change at the moment, albeit fully understanding what Mr. Hutchins is saying around the views in the local area. So my view at the moment is it's not the time to review, but there's a whole load of other things going on in the planning service, which taking up a lot of time at the moment. I think this issue was discussed by council at the start of this year, so I think it's probably not the time to review it, but I understand the concerns being raised, and I think it's something which we'll just need to keep an eye on, is my view at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Perrins. Mr. Walker, did you want to come in as well? Thank you, Colin.
Briefly, Chair, just to add the fact that I suppose the first comment I suppose from me that jumps out is around evidence. And when I read the report, because I've worked for lots of different councils, seen many different ways of operating, both at large city council scale right down to small shire scale, and I understand that exactly where Mr. Hutchins is coming from. I think that we need to approach this in an evidence-based way, first and foremost. And the statement in the report that stated that there is a democratic deficit which exists in the current planning system. I think that members need to understand that if that statement is going to be made, then that needs to be evidenced. And certainly from the report that I read, it wasn't clear to me as to what that democratic deficit might be, or indeed what the evidence might be that such a deficit does exist. As Nick said, the current planning committee works well, it operates efficiently, operates effectively, it takes the relevant factors on planning into account in a very skilled way. I think that evidentially should be the starting point. And in terms of the opportunities to operate differently, then absolutely, we should never stand still. We should always be looking to think about opportunities. But if the current arrangements are working well, then unless there is clear evidence to the contrary, then certainly those current operations, which are very efficient and cost effective, I would strongly recommend would be maintained. As I said, I've worked for many councils and advised many councils, and one of the issues that I have seen, and I have to say that multiple committees are in the minority across the nation at the moment, rather than the majority, as was suggested. But a key risk with moving to a multiple committee operation is one of inconsistency. There is, despite what the report says, an additional level of work which needs to be carried out in terms of maintaining that level of consistency, both in terms of decision making and also policy appreciation, because policies change regularly. So that is a risk that you find that I do see often in councils, where within one council separate committees operate differently or with different emphasis on balance across issues, which clearly with a single committee it doesn't happen. But I would also question the claim about cost. Servicing a committee is very time intensive and resource intensive. Doing it in the way that we do it, which is absolutely comprehensive, and we go into considerable depths in reports, clearly then multiplying that times 3 as 3 work streams is going to be much more intensive, both in terms of resourcing, but also assurance to make sure, both from the planning side, but also the legal side, as well as consultees, to make sure that those decisions are made in an assured way, will come with cost. And whatever members decide to go with this, then I think that absolutely we should have a mind to both the efficiency, the safety in terms of consistency, but also the cost of a potential move towards such an operation. So, I absolutely understand the issues here. I've read the report in detail, Chair and members. There is nothing jumping out of this report that I see that would help me to think that moving to a shared committee system or a multiple committee system would be more efficient or safer, or indeed more engaging than the current operation. Not to say that we can't change or amend or add to the current committee operation, but there's nothing in the report, Chair, that I can see would make us or suggest that we need to move to a multiple committee operation. I hope that's clear, Chair.
Thank you, that's very clear. I wouldn't normally, I'd wait for the members. I would normally wait to the end of the debate to invite them in, but Councillor Phipps is on the call, and I think it's only fair to bring her in at this point to put her arguments forward, and then we'll have our debate afterwards. So, Councillor Phipps, if you're if you're there and would like to contribute.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, Mr. Walker and Mr. Perrins have already said what they think, and I am about to reinforce basically what Mr. Hutchins has said. So I'm very sorry if some of this gets repeated, but you did offer that I could speak tonight. So I'm going to go for it. I mean, I am a Christchurch ward councillor. I'm also a parish councillor, and I have been for many years, well before the advent of BCP. And I've been involved in planning applications and the planning system for a long time. I just think, I know I've heard what the officers have had to say, but the absolute key to effective town planning and making decisions which the public have faith in is local knowledge. And I just know from my own experience, and I'm aware that other parish councils in Christchurch are the same, because that is why they had this report done, that unfortunately many local residents in our neck of the woods don't have confidence in the current system. That's just the way it is. And when we ask them, well, why is that? And they basically say that all but 3 of the committee members of the 15 are from other towns, and they don't really know the area at all. And of course, this will apply to Bournemouth and Poole as well, that they don't have that many, should I say, or a majority on the committee. They're also possibly in the minority as well, but certainly for Christchurch, we are very much in the minority as far as members are concerned. We always say, and you'll hear this said by the administration and by very many councillors, we are 3 individual towns, which have 3 individual characters. We might be called BCP, but we're not one town, and I personally hope we never will be, and I'm sure we won't be. And what might be all right in Bournemouth might not be okay in Christchurch or Poole. And each councillor is bound to look at an application from their own point of view, relating to their own town knowledge, and they use that knowledge to interpret policy subjectively. They might have done a site visit, okay, fine, but that's not always enough. They will have no idea whatsoever of the nuances within an area which could actually interpret policy one way or another. Now, BCP Council has nearly 400,000 residents. It's a lot of people. And it covers a huge area, 161 square kilometres, I understand. It's massive. And a committee of 15 members is also massive. And in my opinion, it's much too large to enable effective and productive discussion. To be functional and effectual, I believe no committee should have that many members. Individual local committees could have, say, 7 members, enabling them, in my opinion, to be much more smooth running. And this is being proved at the moment. The current planning committee is having to start early, or they're having to sit for a whole day even, in order to get through the amount of work. This could cause discussion to be curtailed in an effort to just get through the business of the day. And I do think there is a democratic deficit. You just mentioned that democratic deficit. There is, I've just said. There's only three councillors on it from Christchurch. That's just because of our population, but it doesn't mean we're any less important than the other towns. So as far as we're concerned, and that's why this report has come forward, the planning committee really isn't working for Christchurch. And possibly it doesn't work for Bournemouth or Poole either, and there may be other councillors that think that. Obviously, officers put forward a straightforward report on the application, as they should. And it's up to the committee members to interpret the report, to agree with it or disagree with it. But that's where the problem lies within the current system. For Christchurch, 12 out of 15 members are from other towns. And we believe this puts us at a huge disadvantage within this planning system. And I don't think this is the way to make important and often community-changing decisions. So please don't just dismiss this out of hand. You say it's working well, but there are many out here that actually don't think it's working very well. And if planned properly, as part of this restructuring of the planning system, this is the opportunity. 3 committees are possible and viable. Please look at it. Don't just dismiss it, which is what you seem to be appearing to do here. They do it in other areas, including Dorset. Dorset do it. Why not BCP? I would like to see you give BCP residents confidence in our planning system by supporting a local town member planning committee for each town. And that's what I'm asking. And Chairman, thank you very much for letting me speak this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Phipps. So, members, let's put this out for debate. Sorry, I thought you didn't. No.
Listen to what you all have to say, sir.
Okay, Councillor Slade, thank you.
Do you know, I'm really conflicted on this one. I have huge sympathy for the idea. I really do. But I have a few concerns about it, and I don't know whether, you know, I just want to throw them out there. One is, when Christchurch was in its previous iteration, it was Christchurch and East Dorset Council. So they've always been people from other places, Wimborne, Ferndown, etc., who were making decisions, weren't there? Separate. So Christchurch had a separate planning committee from Wimborne and Ferndown. Okay, that seems rather.
And Chairman, for a point of information, we also had a Dorset overriding committee for major applications.
Okay. See, the problem I've got is it's only 13 miles from one side of the conurbation to the other. And I think it's unacceptable in my mind that people sit on planning committee and don't visit the sites. And if you make the decision to sit on planning committee, you should familiarise yourself with the cultures, the customs, the planning practices that are going on in a different town, because Broadstone is very different from Camford Cliffs. And there are many people who run the other end of the old Paul or the old Bournemouth or the old Christchurch who have never been to my ward, and yet we don't have anybody from Broadstone on planning committee, and we haven't for many, many years. So nobody from Broadstone ever gets a say on a case in Broadstone. So I think we run a bit of a risk in how small do we go. I have a bit of a concern with the fact that Christchurch only has 5 wards. If you have 7 people and they're all from Christchurch, that means that somebody from every ward is in there, which means half the people on the committee are probably conflicted in some way. I think that there is so much talk in the press, and I find it so upsetting, and I'm making this point for the public record, anyone that's listening. There are no brown envelopes, but everyone thinks there are. I have never seen a brown envelope in my time on the council. And I am getting pretty sick of the public thinking that we are all. In fact, on our community page this week, someone asked to see our bank statements to prove that we were not receiving brown envelopes for planning applications. And I find that thoroughly offensive. And I don't think the answer is you build that confidence by making more and more localised planning applications. I think in some respects, you make it that there is no risk that somebody from your street is going to sit on that planning application. But I do think we have to do more to train people on planning. I think it's not right that we don't expect everyone on planning to be trained, that we have not been doing refresher training, and that we have not been doing site visits. And I don't think COVID is a good excuse, because there's nothing to stop you getting in your car and driving around and having a look at a street and not getting out your car. So I really am conflicted, because I have huge sympathy for it, but I don't think it's going to solve the problem that the parish councils think it's going to. I think taking more account of what the parish council's view is when you're deciding a planning application is probably a more sensible approach. And as I'm not on planning, I don't know how much weight is given currently to the view of the parish councils or neighbourhood forums in the areas in which they apply. the concern I have with that, Chair, is because we don't have a parish or a neighbourhood forum for everyone, they actually have an unfair advantage in having somebody that's made, had a meeting, come to a decision, and are then able to have a statutory right to speak. And in other places, no one has a statutory right to speak. So I think there's already a disparity, and we need to fix that. Sorry, I want to be supportive, but I'm just torn.
Okay, okay. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, if nobody else is. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I must say that obviously, although I wasn't really involved in the generation of this report, although I was the chairman of that parish council when it was mooted, I'm not sure why it's come to this. I mean, I believe, and I would be told by Councillor Hutchins from the Highcliffe Parish Council, it's been brought to this committee, but I'm not sure why, because I don't see what on earth we're going to do with it. However, may I just put my point in before the planning chairman? Yeah, I'm a bit disturbed actually by people not knowing how Christchurch did run. We were with Dorset, as you know, we were also with East Dorset. Our planning committee, until recently, had been running very well, but that's neither here nor there. One of the things I would point out, Chairman, apart from having read this and felt that it was a very, very fair report, it doesn't come down either side and say you've got to. There was a mention of Dorset. Dorset actually do run 2 area boards and an overall a committee for the major applications. Now that was mentioned, I'm poking up my own report here, that was mentioned in the report we had previously. Too many major applications. Well, changing the committee structure would actually be helpful with that. And I do know that we had, when this merger was mooted, I'm sure everybody here, if they had been on a council, went to endless briefings about how unitary councils work. We had a lot of representation from Cornwall and Wiltshire and places, and most of them had area boards, and if they didn't, they wished they had. And I was very conscious of that, and I wasn't on the Shadow Council Cabinet, but I was very involved in that work. And we were told consistently, yes, it will be reviewed. We will go with one and see how it works. Well, I am clearly being told, and I accept that the chairman will also think this, as well as the officers, that it is working. However, you were being informed by the parishes, certainly in Christchurch, and maybe even in Broadstone, if you had a parish, that the confidence is not there. That's all really that I can say. I mean, are we able to have a task and finish group ourselves on it? One of the things I would like to suggest is that in the previous report, we're talking about, oh dear, I think I've torn my piece of paper out, the report on, the whole planning structure. Now, I know that probably doesn't include the committees, I'm not sure if it does, but surely this report could feed into that, for example. What I don't want to see is that it's dismissed out of hand right now. I think we should still be thinking there are things we could do, and can we keep it in mind, even if we revisit it in 6 months, or put it on the forward plan, or at least for all of us to think about how the committees are working, how they would improve. And having been on a site visit with the planning chairman, I've never walked so far in my life around an area that I had no idea even existed. So from that point of view, I've got no criticism to make at all of the planning committee in that sense, but it didn't mean that I knew at the end of the day that area. It just meant I knew that particular bit. So really, I'm just trying to persuade the committee. First of all, Chairman, I don't know if you know why we are having it here rather than audit and governance, or even, I don't know where else it would go. But I wouldn't like to see this report just said, oh no, that's the end of it. So I do beg that we don't just dismiss it out of hand. And I would like to see it go further and be looked at further.
Thank you. I will go to, okay. Councillor Kelsey, do you want to wait until Councillor Dion has spoken?
Yep.
Councillor Dion.
I'm happy to come in last, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Dion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's some fallacies about planning that go on. And the first thing is the majority of the decisions are made by officers, not by the committees. Things generally normally usually come to committee when they become controversial, but the officers have a right and left boundary, a duty of a law, and they know their job. And they make the vast majority, not Christchurch councillors versus Poole councillors versus Bournemouth councillors. And I sit on the planning committee, and my big frustration is usually I'm on the opposite side of everything. And I'm probably illegal, immoral, and fattening because of that. But I try to stand up to the principle of we're changing communities here, and we're not just changing them we're changing them forever. And so I'm frustrated often on planning, but I do recognize that I'm often wrong on planning. And I think that's the whole thing about having a Christchurch planning committee and a Poole planning committee, is that actually you level the playing field. Everybody has the same planning committee to review controversial decisions. And if the fact that in Bournemouth or across the BCP, in certain areas, you don't have to provide parking, frustrates me to no end. But that is the rule. That is the law. That's the way it's done. I can't change that. But so all I'm really going to try and say is that actually by having one committee, we're far better off because the playing field is more level across the conservation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dion. Councillor Rigby.
Thanks, Chair. I'm also a bit torn about this one, and I'm probably going to speak from some sort of naivety here because I've not actually sat on planning. I've not ever put in a planning application. I'm not entirely sure how planning works as it is. So maybe what I'm going to do actually is ask more questions that the chairman of planning might be able to answer a bit later on, and hopefully give a bit more clarity to people who don't know what's going on as well. So either way, I don't know. I don't know what would be best, but isn't the way that planning currently runs is that when councillors are making the decisions when things come to committee, that you are just following what is laid down in national planning conditions plus the local plan plus neighbourhood plans. So in a counter argument to saying maybe we should have Christchurch councillors look after Christchurch, Bournemouth after Bournemouth, maybe they should all be mixed up and you shouldn't be from the area at all. And then you wouldn't have any of the accusations of NIMBYism or trying to change things or trying to keep things and potentially come up for appeal because you just don't want something that breaks the character but is actually in line with what planning policy should be. Not that planning policy is necessarily the right thing, but to the law, that's how it should go. So my argument would be, rather than focusing on how the planning committees come together, shouldn't more work be going into looking at putting together more neighbourhood plans where we can really get down into the detail of what we want in our individual communities and our individual wards and areas, and keep not just the uniqueness of the towns, but the uniqueness across the entire conurbation, from Broadstone to Winton to Boscombe to Jumpers, wherever it might be. And Vincent, I can throw anywhere in that you want. So, I really get what you're saying about having the split committees, but is that the right way of using time and resources if we're going to be spending money on it? Or is the right way to really get down to the nitty gritty of it and try and really focus on keeping the unique identity of all the individual parts around the conurbation? So, yeah, maybe a little bit naive, but that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby, and some very good points you've made too. Sorry. Councillor Devon.
It was only a point of information because we're talking about we're not on planning. I chaired planning at Christchurch Borough Council for 4 years, so I just want to throw that in.
Councillor Kelsey. Councillor Kelsey.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, planning, the bane of everyone's life, isn't it? I can't agree with having 3 separate committees. We have 15 members on the BCP committee at the moment, which could be too many. It could be too many. We have a lot of repetitive questions asked in it, but we're thorough on that. It's only recently that a pool councillor from the planning committee actually recommended that a Christchurch application was refused, and that was the beach hut ones. Now, that councillor had been over there, seen for herself, she had done her homework, and she had come up with the right reasons for refusing the right application. It wasn't because she lived in Christchurch, she was from Poole. And to me, that shows that the majority of the members of the planning board do their jobs thoroughly. They go and check. And if they don't go and check each application, then they need to kick up the backside, because they should be. You have a week between getting your papers and doing the actual meetings. Plenty of time, really, to go and find what is going on in that area. Chris, you're absolutely right. Planning is done on policies, local national policies. And that's how we, as planning board members, should treat every application. No matter whether it comes from Timbuktu, Christchurch, Winton or Broadstone, they should all be dealt with on the policies that are dealt with in that area. And that's how I expect the members of my planning board to deal with each application. I get very nasty if they don't. I do get a bit miffed when they start bringing up things that don't exist. Brian will, as he's already said, talks about planning. We all hate parking. We all have the same gripes, but it's the policy. So whether we like that policy or not, we have to deal with each application on that policy. And for me, the way that the planning board members do that is justifiable, correct in every sense. They know that they will get found out. Now everything is recorded. Everyone can go back and see what they've been saying. So I think that we do a really, really good job. Okay, if you look at the makeup of the planning board, there are members from Poole, from Bournemouth, from Christchurch on that panel. It's politically balanced. And that's just what we have to do in line with the Constitution. It's not a case of having 5 from Poole, 5 from Bournemouth, 5 from Christchurch. That's not how it works. It is politically balanced, and there are room for substitutions, the same as there is on every other committee. I think Councillor Slade is absolutely right. It is imperative that anyone sitting on planning board should be fully trained on planning policies and refresher training. And I know Mr. Perrins and myself have talked about this in the past few months, about getting extra training in place so that all members are kept fully updated with any changes in the NPPF and other such policies that we have. It's imperative that we're all as up to date as we can, not for our sakes, but for the people we represent, the residents. It's about doing what is right for the residents. We're not always going to please the residents all the time. And in fact, in planning, we're probably the one group of people that upset residents more than we please them, because not all the time can we please them. It's a lot of the time we have to go with the policies. This was dealt with under audit and governance, I think about a year ago. This came to audit and governance, and at that time, they stated that it should stay as it is. And as we've heard earlier, I think to keep it under review is the right thing to do. We've heard Mr. Perrins going on today about changes in the planning system and how it's working. We need to give that time to bed in. There's no point changing something now when they're halfway through a review of how planning should work. I think we should wait at least another year before we even look at this subject again. In that time, hopefully, planning system would have been vastly improved. There'll be much quicker applications going through, and everyone will be able to concentrate on exactly what we're doing. So from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, I cannot support going forward with 3 committees. I think we should stick with 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to have my 5 pennyworth now. Yes, having been a member of the planning board for over 6 years now, 7 years nearly, yeah, I've got some experience of this. First thing I'd like to say is I don't believe that we have got an enormous conurbation into planning terms to look at. I know Christchurch very well. I also know Poole very well, and I love Bournemouth as much as I do Poole and Christchurch. So, you know, they are different. They are different. you know, as has been said, you know, it's all made of it's policy. Let's just go back a step now to when LGR started. The whole idea of LGR was to make efficiencies and bring us into one, and the planning system is one of those things that has been trying. Now I'm just wondering, and I have to say with that, of course, that means because we don't have a new local plan, when we have a planning board meeting, we're applying the planning policies from 3 different local plans. It is really hard work, but we do it, and what may be applicable in one part of the conurbation may not be applicable in another. And so roll on the day when we get a consolidated local plan for the whole area. But within that, what I would say is that part of the planning process, and it is a bit of a democratic deficit, in that the parish and town councils of Christchurch and Watford and all the others are statutory consultation, the planning process. That is not the case in Poole or Bournemouth, but it is now with Holderness, because Holderness has now got its own parish council. So, you know, there is an opportunity for parish and town councils as part of the statutory consultative process to put their views forward, and they have to by law, you know, then so the planning department has to take account of them. So there is that way of dealing with it. What else I've got to say about this? Yeah. Neighbourhood plans. I think if town and parish councils really want to influence the planning through the planning policies, which is what makes the decision, it's not the individuals, it's the policies, then the way to do that is through shaping and creating neighbourhood plans, because then that becomes part of policy, and that's how decisions made by the planning boards are made, by looking at the policy. So it's a lot more work there, but you know, neighbourhood plans is the key to it. I'm also wondering how much of the, you know, and I understand the issue about confidence. I'm just wondering how much of that lack of confidence is coming from the problems that we were addressing earlier on. Because it's clear that the planning system has had some problems in bringing those 3 systems together. And naturally, there's been some frustration, a lot of customer frustration. So how much of that is being created by those problems? Now, my view is that we've got to pursue with those improvements, get those right before we start trying to implement some other changes. We've got to get that bit right. But I do agree it needs to be probably kept possibly for review in the future. But what I will go back to is the fact that it did go, a formal report was considered by the Audit and Governance Committee on the 26th of November. And this wasn't just a chat over the relative merits. There was a lot of research went into it, and they concluded that the system as it is should remain. That was put to Cabinet and reviewed and agreed, and to the Audit and Governance Committee. There was a working group looking at this in some detail, and it was actually then agreed by full council in February. I think it was either in January or February of this year, that we should not change the system. And I think to try to change it now would be wrong. You know, we've got to get the planning system functioning properly first. Now, I'd like just to comment that the reason why we're considering this again is because somebody asked us to, because any resident has got the right to ask overview and scrutiny, consider a matter that they wish to bring to the committee. And we, as a board, decided, yes, that's a reasonable request. A case was made, and so that's why we're talking about it today. We agreed that we would talk about it. So the point is now, what do we do to take it forward, if we believe we need to? My view is that we do not need to take any more action on this now. I think it's been aired. I think I'm not sure that we can serve any useful purpose by putting it on the forward plan at this point. Although if anybody has got a contrary view, then my view is that we do not need to take this further at this point. I mean, you know, the head of planning is here, and the director, our new director, has taken this on board. The portfolio holders there in the background. You know, these are things for them as a management team to consider. And if we don't get the improvements, or there are further represented, or we come across other problems. So I think then at that point maybe it may be resurrected. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm sorry. It's a late. It's not a recommendation or a suggested recommendation. It's really just a late observation. So in section 3, I mean, I think that it's always useful to look at these things, and it is complicated. But I think section 3 of the report talks about comparative areas, and I was intrigued because it wasn't in any order, and I always like seeing things in order. But when you sift it, as I have done on a spreadsheet, it's actually the areas that have a large physical area, geography, that tend to have the area committees. The largest by population is Manchester Metropolitan, and that has a single committee. And I think, you know, I'm like Chris. I've not actually had anything to do with planning, so I'm not across that one. But Dorset have the most applications as well, and that again they have an area committee. So I think that on balance, it kind of seems like I can see it could go either way. I can see, and I share the view around Bournemouth and Poole having a deficit because we don't have anything more local than BCP for our needs. But as Chris said, we do have the opportunity of neighbourhood plans, at least, you know, if and when we can get the neighbourhood plans in place. So I think I'm minded, having come at it really cold, to say it's kind of, well, we know it's not working, and that's why we've had the previous comment, but actually it would create enormous more upset if we change it again right now.
I agree with that. And yeah, I had actually picked up on that point on looking at the report. So, but I don't think we need to do anything more at this point, unless anybody's got a contrary view. Councillor Deadman.
Well, yes, Chairman, obviously I would have a contrary view, but I would like to think that if somebody bought it back in a year, maybe 12 months, without actually writing it into the forward plan, I mean, it does actually, it is something that we could look at in 12 months, say, but I'm quite happy to say, right, you know, I'll bring it back in 12 months or 9 months or something, if that's going to be possible to revisit, because as I don't know who actually said, we've all had a voice tonight, but yes, planning is going through a terrific upheaval. But my point was very much, and I will reiterate it, that when they are going through the upheaval, this is the time to look at it. But obviously, the committee think something else. But thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I just got one more point to make. When the planning system was sort of structured as at the moment, and some of the changes to the Constitution were made, one of the key elements of the system we have at the moment is the increased role of ward councillors in the planning decision process. The call-in process has changed. There's a greater time for ward councillors, and the ward councillor really does take. So my advice to those are concerned about the system or particular areas where there's some contention maybe in a decision, is that the ward councillors are really engaged with it and do attend the planning boards to put the case to their residents. And I think that if we've got really strong representation from well-informed ward councillors, I think that will help. So, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, there's two things. The first is whether we could ask somebody, whether it's through the chair of planning or directly to Mr. Perrins, who I presume is probably still on the call, about whether we can put out a bit more of a campaign, a communications campaign about planning, because you know, I think there are a lot of misconceptions. Obviously, I shared the most contentious one earlier, but I do think that, you know, I write to my residents every week with a list of every planning application in Broadstone because I'm so worried that they're going to miss something. And I know that doesn't happen everywhere, and that's not everyone's way of doing things, but people don't have information, and it's when they don't have information that they assume something else is going on because they have to make it up. So if there's anything the council can do in terms of some sort of communication thing about this is how planning actually works, so that people feel a bit more engaged, people know to talk to their ward councillors, because you'd be surprised how many times we find something's, you know, gone absolutely haywire and no one's come to us as ward councillors because they just don't really understand what we're for. But so, you know, I'd be grateful if part of the communication plan that planning takes, it could look at that. looking at the timeline of all the changes to the structures that we did on the previous item, the implementation of the single planning system and the reorganisation will be done by April. It feels like any review would need to allow that to happen, to bed in, to give those officers a chance to have new systems to operate. But then what worries me, Chair, is we're then months away from a new election, and we then get this call, which happens in the year prior to an election, where we say, oh, we can't possibly make a decision because we need to allow the new council to make that decision because, you know, they might have a different view. So if we're going to do it, there is a pretty narrow window for us considering doing it, and it's most likely it would then need to take place, if we did do it, with effect from the next council anyway. So I just think we need to be mindful. No point bringing it back before late summer next year, but no point bringing it back later than next winter, because it isn't going to happen, because we'll be hitting purdah again. So there's a very narrow window of opportunity, unless we actually park it and say, actually, we really need to get the new local plan in, because we've got 3 local plans at the moment. So, you know, at the moment, you've got this situation where, quite understandably, the parish councils in Christchurch are saying, well, hang on, they don't understand our local plan. And actually, it's incumbent on those planning members to make themselves familiar, and the officers to give them the right information. But by the time we get to April 23, there will only be 1 local plan for them to learn. So there's less reason by the time we get there to need those separate committees. So I just think there's a little window, and it might close quite quickly. So please don't bring it back before the end of next summer.
There we go, Councillor Devon. That's a little thing you put in your diary.
Yes,
right.
I think that's God willing and the creek don't rise, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Kelsey.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Slade made a very, very, very good point about the local plan. I don't want to just see this disappear, because I think, you know, we do need to review it at some stage. I would rather the officers now concentrate so much more of their time to get the local plan up and running. I think that is probably the most essential thing that the planning department need to do at this precise moment in time. Get the new local plan. That way, as Councillor Slater said, we can all sing from one hymn sheet about one set of policies, and that will make life easier for us as planners, for the officers, for the residents, for everybody. So from my perspective, that is the most important thing we can do right now, is concentrate resources on the local plan.
Agreed, and I think we're in agreement here by the looks of it that we'll leave it to those to bring it back to this board if they feel they need to, at any time they feel they need to. But given that the Audit and Governance Committee voted to retain the current system, and that was agreed by full council earlier in the year, I don't think it would be the right moment to bring it back in for further discussion at the moment. So unless anyone disagrees with that, I'm going to now close the debate on this item. And in doing so, I'd just like to thank Mr. Bob Hutchins for representing the parish council this evening. And I don't know if there's anything you'd just like to add before we close. Mr. Hutchins, is there anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Chairman. Not really. I've heard a lot tonight. I've learned a lot. Some very interesting comments. Particularly liked some of the comments from the Chairman of Planning. Who, yeah, 1 or 2 things I didn't agree with, but I'm not banging my head against a brick wall with those. I do think the starting point has always got to be the confidence that the system gives to residents, and I don't think you should lose sight of that. Other than that, thank you very much for the airing. Thank you for allowing me to take part in it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Perrins. I think we'll close the debate now, unless there's anything you want to add to that. But no, okay. Right. Well, thanks for turning up this evening. You've got a busy day ahead of you tomorrow. We'll see you again. Thank you. Bye.
Just a quick thing, if I may, Chairman, is just to remind councillors that they are always welcome to come along and sit in on the planning board and learn about planning if ever they wish to do so. And I would encourage them. It's fascinating stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Well, of course, we all know which of the committees sits the longest, don't we?
Yeah, we can blame that.
Okay. Right, we haven't quite finished. We've now come on to agenda item, what is it, 7, which is the forward plan. I've got a couple of comments to make on that. Well, first of all, can I ask members if any members have got any comments they'd like to make on the forward plan? No, in that case, I've been asked to ask if anybody's got any comments regarding the climate change inquiry session that we'll be having. That's something that you and I really need to talk about, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't actually gone through the scope of this yet, because obviously it's linked to the annual climate plan. But yes. I think it would be really helpful if members were had particular areas of interest that they wanted us to focus on. I thought it worked really well when we did the transformation one to look at different elements of it and to break the meeting up into different elements of it. So it might be quite useful if we can ask members to let us know within the next couple of weeks about issues that they want us to relate to. Yeah.
Councillor Devon?
Well, I've got one that's very close to my heart, and that's item 5, sorry, misread it. Sewage. That is brought by Councillor Rigby on August 2021 to be heard within 6 months. Now, unless I've missed it, we haven't had it. And I would really like it sooner or later, sooner than later. Otherwise, we'll go round to January, won't we?
We had a member seminar, didn't we, from Wessex Water?
And was that it?
And I'm just wondering, is that a classic thing where we ask for a scrutiny, we get a member seminar, and then the member seminar goes, we've done that. No, and I think we need to look carefully about what are we looking to achieve from it, because since Councillor Rigby brought this up, it has become a really live topic. It wasn't a live topic for the average resident. Chris was clearly foresightful in that. So yeah, I know, as if you didn't have it on your mind. But I think you're right. And whether we can put that in with our climate work or not, because it is partly related, but it's partly nothing to do with climate and everything to do with lack of investment.
Yeah, and unfortunately, of course, we're not really in control of it either, because it's the authority that looks after that, the Environmental Agency and South West Water, of course. So, you know, if it was to come to an overview and scrutiny, we're probably going over what we've already said. But I think we did think there was some value in at least understanding their position on this. And the only thing we haven't done is actually put a date on this, which we did promise to do. And I haven't done that yet, and I'm remiss in not doing that. But we did agree to put it on ONS, even outside of the members' briefing that we got. And I think we should still consider it, even if it's only to inform overview and scrutiny what the status is, who's responsible for what, and what the events are, so to improve the understanding of it, because you do get a lot of misinformation in the press about what's going on. And I think even just to clarify the situation would be useful. Councillor Hadley.
Yes, thank you. I think because I discussed it with him, but part of Chris's suggestion on that was because there are other agencies than just Wessex Water. Is about the Environment Agency around Ofwat, and obviously the changes that Parliament have just voted through, and it does have implications for what we do in terms of storm flow drainage and also development in terms of things that we do control, we do contribute. So I would have thought it would be worth more scrutiny. Thank you.
The issue that's in the back of my mind is that you know, we're very likely to be forming another overview and scrutiny committee, which will be called the Place Committee. This is just something that's being worked on. And of course, this is an environmental issue, and we haven't actually had room to put this kind of thing on the forward plan at the moment. Although I don't discount that we won't be able to, but I suggest that it probably won't be until about February of next year. And it may be, as Councillor Slade said, that we can accommodate that within the climate thing, but it's probably not really the right. I don't know, but if you'll bear with us, we're not going to knock it off the forward plan. We just need to decide when is the best place to address it, if that's okay. Sorry, yeah.
I think we need to do it ASAP. I mean, we did tell Councillor Ruby it would be 6 months. I think under the circumstances of the reports that we've had very recently within the area, with overflows coming out of Boscombe, seafront and everything, we rely so heavily on tourism for the progress of this conurbation. It is the fundamentally most important business function that we have in this area. And therefore, I seriously think we need to be looking at this as a matter of urgency, not just let's leave it till February to do. Wessex Water need to come and answer questions, so does so many other authorities. And Councillor Anderson, in his role with environment, needs to pull his finger up and come and give us a very full and detailed report on this.
I mean, I don't know how up to date this cabinet forward plan is, but it's pretty light for December. So, I mean, you know, there isn't a huge amount, unless we're going to suddenly be inundated with new things, that we could potentially get this on. And I think, you know, some of us, certainly Councillor Hadley and myself, have been continuing to engage with the Chief Exec of Wessex Water since we had that report. And to be fair to those members in the East, it was about Poole Harbour. So it was very focused on our end of the conurbation. But we're still pushing and pushing, aren't we? And, you know, we're not happy with what we're getting. And nobody's talked about Boscombe and Christchurch Harbour at all, because it's all been about Poole Harbour. So, I mean, I think if we can find space for it in December, I think it would offer huge reassurance to our residents and our visitors. I agree with Councillor.
Okay, what I'd like to do is just leave this for the Vice Chair and I to discuss. And, you know, we have agreed it needs to be on the forward plan. We haven't actually agreed when we would do it. We need to do that. So if you could just leave that with us to make that decision, bearing in mind what you've said. Oh, sorry. Have I got to repeat that? Okay, well, if everybody's agreed that we can remove the acquisition and compulsory purchase order strategy in that it's not being worked on, and if it does, it comes out on the regeneration programme that will be presented. And the second one is review of leisure centre management. Now, the contracts for the leisure centres have been extended for quite some time. And
sorry, okay, Chair, sorry, I missed that from the forward plan. Can I just declare an interest in that? So I may.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Through the more occasions.
Fine. You know, the BH Live agreement has got many years to run yet. These things are being looked at, but there is not a consultancy, as it says in the forward plan, engaged on looking at this at the moment. So we're not likely to see a paper on this for quite some time. So I would like to take that off the forward plan. It will come forward when there are changes proposed, and I know officers are looking at it, but you know, who knows when that's going to be? It could be in 2 or 3 years' time, given the fact that you know the leisure centres contracts have been extended and arrangements for the intermediate period have already set in place. So we're not going to be seeing anything for a while. The last one was on. There's an item in here for the maintenance of key destination locations across BCP, Poole Quay, blah, blah, blah. Again, We have approached Chris Saunders, and we have had some information on this, but there isn't a sort of bespoke paper being written on this. But what he has said is that Pool Key leisure offer features within the scope of the new BCP seafront strategy, so it's in there. Consultation took place on this over the summer. The recent URC cabinet report, which approved the formation of the future place team, also approved feasibility funding to develop a master plan for Pool Key and some early stage interventions in time for next summer. The project is in the process of being initiated and will be managed by the destination development team within D&C. The project manager has been appointed and a project initiation document is being prepared. We will be working with a range of local stakeholders to refine and develop the draft master plan prepared in 2018 as part of the neighbourhood plan. Some outcomes for the master plan will look at resurfacing and tidying in the public realm and roadway, commercial leisure and cultural pop-ups, infrastructure to support event activities, access and movement reflecting the seasonal TRO restrictions. The aim is to bring a full investment business case forward in the spring. So I think that that does actually meet the objectives that Councillor Howe set out in his request for Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, I'm a ward councillor for that area as well. I think that is interesting. I suppose the question is, at what point do we get to the opportunity to scrutinise that, particularly given the URC will be leading on it in terms of reviewing that it actually is meeting the need. It does tie back to actually the paper we had before us about the handling of this afternoon, or before you, because I was on the committee this afternoon, about the handling of the summer, because it's a key destination in the way that the seafront is. So there is kind of something about what are the preparations for next summer in terms of the areas away from the beach. But I'd be really keen for it to be reviewed if that's possible. I think. Yeah,
I'm not saying what I think the original requirement in the full plan, it sort of got lost a bit, and one of the reasons for it, quite simply, is because the officer dealing with it has been away for a long time and still away. So we look for clarification from Chris Saunders, and the original request was solely about Pool Key. And what they're saying is that yes, that is now part of a live project that will be brought forward by the URC. And there will be a business case made for the work that will be done. Now, the URC won't be making those decisions because it will go through the formal financial approval process in some form of a paper, and ultimately will come to cabinet, and it will then be subject to scrutiny by us. So all I'm saying is the normal course of business will or should take care of it. So for that reason, I think that we should take that off, because it will come forward as part of normal business. Yes, Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, nothing so major like that. It's just with a reference to a previous item on the Popestown station where it was mentioned about bus subsidies, although I should have asked the question and I didn't. I mean, I don't know how much bus subsidy the council gives, but on here you've got concessionary bus fares policy. So I just wondered if that could be shoehorned in as to how much money we give the bus companies to run routes that they don't see as being viable.
I can't answer that, but I think it does encompass it. Maybe I think Councillor Hadley's probably got some more information on this.
I could give you a ballpark figure, but don't quote me. It's really only the school transport that we subsidise, and we've restricted that quite significantly. It's less than 500,000. I think it might be down to about 200,000 now. The other element, of course, is the national concessionary fares, which is nationally set. So we have to deal with that as something that's set nationally.
Yeah, I mean, I was aware that we had pulled a lot of subsidies. So yeah, it's just interesting because of the figure that SWR want us to put into their asset.
Of course, it is on the forward plan, isn't it? That is an item that's coming up. Yeah, so we'll find out when it comes forward. So are you happy with just leaving it on there? And okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Earl, I saw you put your hand up.
It was purely to say what Andy said there.
Okay, lovely. So members, I think we've just come to the end of that, and then we'll debate on note the meeting dates, and with that we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry about that, members. Yeah, part of the forward plan is, of course, reporting on the activities of the working group. And we have the local plan working group who's been beavering away very, very hard. And we're at a point where the plan will be going out for public consultation in a while. But what I wanted to do was make sure that the working group did report back to this committee to tell you what it's been doing and what its progress has been, because that is the role of the working group. So I'm sorry to keep you hanging on for so long, Mike. So would you like to give us that brief? Thank you.
Fine, thank you, Chair. I'll keep this as brief as I can. I appreciate the amount of time you spent during the day on scrutiny, and it doesn't come easy at this time of night. As you'll be aware, the working group on the local plan was due to meet in August to look at the housing needs assessment that the consultancy, Iceni consultancy, was producing. Now, that was supposed to have been a very, very significant meeting for a number of reasons. Firstly, that the NPPF states that any local plan should begin with a housing needs assessment, and we as a local plan working group had been looking at a draft issues and options consultation based upon the standard formula that the government were insisting on us using, without there having even been a housing needs assessment. So it was very important that we actually had that meeting, but because of the length of time it took, we didn't actually meet again until the 11th of November, i.e. last Thursday, last Thursday, and we spent 2.5 hours looking through and discussing the housing needs assessment. A, so that we could understand what it was all about. Secondly, to see what the figures were that the housing needs assessment was producing, and thirdly, whether there was any opportunity to develop a local scheme and call upon the issue of exceptional circumstances so that we could actually present our own housing numbers rather than those of the government. As you'll be aware, the standard method that the government were insisting councils used was giving rise to over 42,000 homes in the lifetime of the plan to 2038. That was going to be somewhere in the region of 2,700 homes a year having to be built. We already know that there has been over the last few years, there's been an under delivery of housing, and that was incorporated into that figure as part of the standard method. The other problem with the standard method is that it was based upon 2014 data, and that's what the government are insisting upon us using. And because of the nature of the projections at the time, it has led to that very, very high figure of over 42,000 homes. The NPPF, however, does allow councils to calculate a local method of determining housing need if they can prove exceptional circumstances. And the interesting thing is that the second part of the housing needs assessment evaluated the standard method and identified a significant mismatch between the actual data that exists based around 2014 and the projections that were being used for the calculations. And that mismatch is centered around net migration for BCP Council. And the data from 2014, or the projections based upon 2014 data, has very, very heavily overestimated the actual net migrations that we know have subsequently taken place. And so when you change the projections, which is what this local method is basically doing, we find that actually the housing need falls from in excess of 42,000 to 25,600, which of course means that with the amount of brownfield sites that have come forward, it could be possible to meet that housing need on brownfield sites. So it is a very, very significant development. And in discussing these findings and this work from ICENI, the local party working group felt that it was worth the risk of including this local method as an option along with the standard method that the government are insisting on to go in the issues and options consultation document. And our last bit of work in that meeting was to look at revisit the housing needs section in the discussion document, the issues and options document. The officers had kindly rewritten it on the basis that we would agree to include the new method. And what was really interesting is that the balance of housing types and sizes was almost identical with both methods. So there is plenty of evidence to support the local method for calculating housing need. The chapter has been rewritten. It has been modified. Now we've had an email tonight from Mark Axford telling us that all the suggestions that we put forward at the meeting have been incorporated into the housing section, and it is hoped that that will now be confirmed by the end of this week. So what comes next? The consultation is going to be scheduled for the 10th of January. The document has to be finalised, proofread, and a whole series of questions have got to go along with the consultation, and that consultation is an 8-week consultation running from the 10th of January to the 13th of March. And I would point out, Chairman, that you made reference at the introduction to this update that the local plan will be going out to consultation shortly. It is not the local plan that's going out to consultation shortly. That doesn't exist yet. It is this issues and options consultation document that is going out on the 10th of January. The local plan working group will not meet again now until early in the new year, when we will start looking at the draft text for the local plan, which the strategic planning team are already beginning to work on and will continue to work on. And of course, we will also look at the results of the consultation at the appropriate time. So more to come, but at the moment, we have had a significant input into the consultation document by insisting on this local method of calculating housing need being developed and being incorporated. And I'm sure Philip would want to, the portfolio holder might want to come in here as he's appeared on screen.
Thank you very much.
That's it, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I do apologise about prematurely closing the meeting and forgetting about you. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought we'd escaped, and I definitely don't have a glass of wine next to me at all. I just wanted to make 2 points. First of all, just to put on record once again, thanks to the local plan working group, who've continued to put a lot of significant time and effort into this. And I really love the collaborative way that we're doing all of this. It feels right, and the fact that we're able to incorporate pretty much the entirety of the very meaningful and helpful amendments into that final consultation document is a testament to that. Just to underline that point that Mike Brook made, we can't say clearly enough, this is not the local plan, this document that is going out. It is not the draft local plan. And the reason I think we have to be quite firm on that is because actually Dorset and many other councils do it very differently. They come up with their draft local plan, they go to consultation on that. We are actually going out to consultation on the broad issues and opportunities that will inevitably have to face no matter which permutation we go through. So I think it's really important that as councillors we all are aligned on that message that this is not the draft local plan, because I've had a number of people saying I don't like the look of the draft local plan today. So as long as we can put that out loud and clear. One slight nuance to Councillor Brooks's point around this new calculation method. The government have been exceptionally clear that the standard methodology is the only methodology in town. That is the method that you've got to work with. And there is a version where you can say, well, actually we're going to go to housing need first and plead exceptional circumstances, but it really has to be exceptional circumstances, and it carries a tremendous amount of risk going that way. We're not quite doing that. What we've actually done as part of it's actually slightly separate to the housing needs assessment. We've taken a deep dive into the government standard methodology, which they say that we've got to work with, and we found some changes in there, as Councillor Brooks has pointed out, some data that seems to be incorrect, which will then form the basis for an alternative method, but it's not a pure alternative method. It is a variation on the government standard methodology. So in many ways it's quite innovative. What we're saying is the government have said you've got to play by these rules, and we've said absolutely we will play by those rules, but you got a little bit wrong and we just want to change that. And I think that's a really important nuance to land, because just having the idea that we're throwing the standard methodology away, we've come up with our own version, we're doing things differently, is very, very risky, and will not be very likely to garner much positive attention when we come to the inspection period. So it is an innovative method that we're doing here. We are playing by the rules, but we are just saying actually actually there's some nuance in there that is not quite correct, and I do hope that that will be looked favourably on by government. Of course, Councillor Brooks has pointed out that that migration part makes a dramatic difference to our overall figures, taking the plan that we would have to make at around 2,700 to around 1,600 homes, which not only is crucial for protecting the greenbelt, but also if we really want to use a local plan from a more placemaking point of view, which is of course what we want to do, it gives us many more options at that lower figure. So I hope we're all aligned about the fact that we are playing by the government's rules. We're just doing it in a slightly different way, and hopefully we can then go through this options and issues consultation, get the feedback, and then start the really hard work of preparing the local plan next year. But once again, thank you for your time as well, Chairman, and all of the people that have been working on the local plan working group.
Chair, if I could just come back just for a second.
Yes, please. Yeah.
I wasn't intending to suggest that we were throwing away the standard method, and yes, it is a variation upon a theme, to coin a music term. However, members might want to be aware that the new Secretary of State for Housing, etc., Michael Gove, is actually considering possibly changing the standard method, because he understands, I believe, that the data is out of date and we ought to be using more up-to-date information. But he hasn't made that decision yet, but it could change things completely when he does. We'll just be aware of that, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. What this does do for us members, the working group is now going to not do anything until probably January. And then, of course, once the consultation does go out, there'll be a couple of months out for consultation. That gives us the opportunity to then start the other working group on enforcement and the other one on trees, which have been waiting in their wings for a long time. And it will be in that order. So if anybody wants to be a member of the working group looking at enforcement issues, please let me know. And I will be writing to you to ask you specifically, individually, if you would like to. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I know that you want to do them in that order. I was just wondering, bearing in mind that the consultation for the local plan will then be open until the middle of March, it might be that our views on trees might need to be put into the consultation on the issues and options about how we view trees. I don't know whether we need to check with planning whether there is a convergence, because if we come up with a set of recommendations and the consultation's closed, will we still be able to put them in as a body of the council, or should we be putting them in as part of the consultation process?
My understanding on the trees is that there was a separate strategy for trees being worked out by the department, and that's what we saw that study informing. And I'm not sure that the local plan is even in a position to be putting that kind of strategy forward just yet. And I don't think it does at this point. Does it?
There is a tree strategy being worked up. You're quite right, Chairman. There's a tree strategy at the moment.
That was it. All right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, I was going to go out on a limb and branch out around trees. Sorry, it's very late, I know, but you're absolutely right. And also, just a reminder, it's too late now to change anything in the issues and consultations document for the local plan, because it's been delayed anyway. But that's just our issues and consultation document to formulate all of the important things we're going to have to consider then to go into the local plan. So there's ample time to do other pieces of work around trees, biodiversity, you name it, and then feed that into the actual local plan creation process that will come next year. So yeah, I think that'll be a really worthwhile piece of work to do. I mean, obviously not stepping on the toes of other departments, but I think that will really help us with the local plan.
Councillor Deadman.
Yes, I won't take a minute, but that seems to me, with my calculations in the housing figures, to be 16,000 difference. So which figures are we going to be using in the options, issues and options, or both? Are we going to put both out there?
My understanding is that the consultation will include both models, and that but when the local plan does eventually go out, it will go out with one recommendation.
Yeah.
So this is consulting on all the options we have at the moment. to get the views of everybody. And am I correct, Councillor Broadhead?
Yes, you are, Chair. Yeah, and that was the working local plan working group reaffirmed that as well. It's so both of those figures will be in there for to get public's feedback, and again, it's worth underlining that in the issues and options consultation document, all the way through, we've presented pretty much all the options that we could have to face, so that we can get some genuine inclusive feedback from residents and businesses. So every site that's been promoted to us is being put out there. We're not picking and choosing which ones we like or we don't like. We're putting them all out there, and again, all of the primary choices, including the two choices of methods, we put in there so that we can get public feedback part of the next stage.
Thank you very much. I think we're done. Yeah. Good night. Thank you, Mike, for hanging around for so long. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.